Survivor Season 41 is quickly turning into a show about who can get the most advantages first, and at the same time gather the least amount of disadvantages. Don't worry, I'm not a purist and someone who thinks old school Survivor was the only time Survivor was good, but I think there is something to be said about moderation. We are now 3 episodes into the season, and there's already been the possibility of 10 people to be given an advantage or a disadvantage. If you are confused, don't worry, I've done my homework, I've crunched all the numbers, and by the time this video is done, you will 100% guaranteed not be confused about what's going on in Survivor. Careful for spoilers for everything during the episode if you haven't seen it yet. I'll number all these things as we go through it, so stay along, get organized, and let's jump into episode 3.
Still haven't found it, and it's gonna drive me insane.
Number 10, Camp Life. A lot of this episode can be described as jumping from one plot point to another, and so the little bit of time we get to learn about these characters were welcomed, and we actually get some real character development and social moments taking place on all 3 of our tribes. We first cut to Yase at night as Liana is struggling with the aftermath of voting out Voce. She really wants to prove herself as a great Survivor player, but as a wise man once said, "It's getting the best of me." Over on Ua, we have an early morning party as JD is doing a bunch of his favorite Survivor impressions. Finally on Luvu, we have what might be the most confusing edit that a player has ever been given in Survivor history. Cut to episode 1, and Naseer was in trouble for throwing Danny under the bus. Then in episode 2, we see Sydney explain that they need Naseer, but a whole 2 days later, she is now saying in episode 3 they need to cut him out of the tribe. This is one of the highlights of the episode actually, as we get a flashback explaining exactly how Sydney is exposing Naseer to the rest of the tribe. Number 9, Beware Not Hidden. The Survivor producers really wanted to find a new way for someone to be chosen to go on the good old Survivor Summit, but one of the major complaints with this episode is how artificial and fake they make the Beware advantage feel by just hiding it in plain sight. Ultimately, Brad, Sydney, and Tiffany find the piece of paper, but something interesting only happens to Tiffany as the rest of her girls' alliance ends up seeing what's going on.
Let me be clear, I never would have shared that with them if I got it without them in front of me.
Number 8, JD looking for the idol. It was in the promo, so we knew it was coming, but it is always so much fun to see Survivor fans go out and play Survivor, and when the realization hits them that Survivor is really tough. This happens to JD right here, as he finds out looking for idols is way harder in real life than what we see on TV. We then get some insight on the Ua tribe, with JD breaking down who he thinks could have the idol. He says Ricard could have it, Shan's smart, Jeannie never stops looking, but for some reason JD is convinced that Brad doesn't have it because he never leaves the shelter.
I want everybody on the internet to shut up talking of idols are easy to find. The idol is power in this game.
Flashback time, as the number 7 moment is Brad finding the idol. And if you've been watching my videos for any period of time, then you would probably know I love me some Survivor flashbacks. We cut to Brad saying that he found the idol 30 minutes ago with Jeannie. As they are trying to go through what the idol says, they realize that Xander might have one as well because of the speech he said about butterflies. This is where we go a little too deep in the flashback and editing hole, as we get a flashback within a flashback as we see Xander say his phrase at the previous challenge. And if you're keeping up, that means Survivor went all in this episode with the weird editing tricks, as we get a double flashback moment here with Brad finding the idol, as well as earlier in the episode when Sydney exposes Naseer to the rest of her tribe. Number 6, the sneak out. And once again, this scene brings up more questions than answers, as we see Brad building a fake body so no one will notice him sneaking out in the middle of the night. But did anyone else notice that the entire Ua tribe is sleeping on the beach? I'm sorry, but that really seems like an important piece of the puzzle that we are missing. Maybe it was just a nice night and they wanted to sleep under the stars, maybe, but I have so many questions that need answers. Why don't they have a shelter? The way that Sydney and Tiffany both sneak out is way more straightforward compared to Brad's approach. However, as someone who doesn't normally pay attention to the music selection, take a closer listen. Like, I'm talking 10 out of 10 for setting the spooky vibe. Number 5, the late night spooky meetup. With the lack of swaps taking place this season, I really like how Survivor is getting creative with the cross-tribal lines that are forming every week with the summit. But although it looks completely different this time, the story is pretty much the exact same. However, there's a slight variation this time with adding a tarp into the dilemma. We need to bring out the trusty notepad for this as things start to get really confusing. I know from first-hand experience that the casual viewers thought this was confusing because my parents are big Survivor fans never missed an episode, but they were confused about what was going on here. If all 3 players picked tarp, then they all get a tarp. If all 3 players picked risk a vote, then they all would lose their vote. However, if it was a split decision and some picked tarp and some picked risk, well then everyone who picked tarp got nothing, and the players who picked risk their vote would get a steal a vote advantage. Yeah. What ends up happening here is a punishment for choosing the safe option. Sydney and Tiffany end up picking the safe option, and Brad chooses to risk his vote. Therefore, the girls walk away with nothing, and Brad gets a steal a vote advantage that he's also not allowed to use because the 3-way idol's not activated yet. Are you still following me? Take a second, let's breathe. In and out, I'm going to explain all the advantages that have taken place so far this season. Xander has a 3-way idol, and Brad just found one this episode. But because they are not activated, they are not allowed to vote. Going to Summit Island, we have Evie and Tiffany choose to protect their vote on Yasa, and on Luvu, Danny and Sydney decide to protect their vote. However, Xander, Deshawn, and JD decide to risk their vote and earned an extra vote advantage. Finally, Brad decided to risk his vote and earned a steal a vote advantage. See? Super easy to understand.
That is not an advantage.
Back to the normal Survivor programming, the number 4 moment from the episode is the immunity challenge. We start off with the amazing back and forth between Brad and Xander before the challenge starts as they connect from their love of butterflies and broccoli. And then we get a great callback to the amazing Survivor David vs. Goliath challenge where we have everyone's favorite Survivor gif of Angelina struggling for her life. We get a nice little redemption arc as Tiffany is able to successfully maneuver herself through the obstacle course, and then the challenge ends with a nice variation of a Survivor classic where the survivors need to land the beanbags over their head. We even get a moment that reminded me of Survivor Heroes vs. Villains, as Xander and Brad were discussing hidden immunity idols the same way Colby and Russell were so many years ago. This is the best challenge we've seen all season, hands down, by far. We get callbacks, we get underdog stories, we get Yellow finally winning a challenge. It's there, everyone enjoy it.
Listen, when the challenge is over, you go to JT, okay? He's gonna give you something.
Number 3. Ua loses the challenge and goes right back to camp. It quickly becomes Ricard and Shan's decision on who to keep and who to send home, as Brad and JD are the ones on the chopping block. We can debate all day long about what ends up happening at Tribal Council, but this hurts me as I've really grown to enjoy watching Brad and JD play Survivor. So please comment down below who you would have gone with. The decision gets a little more complicated as we see Shan notices a note hanging from JD's pants. This is 100% on JD for playing sloppy Survivor, as this should not happen, causing Shan and Ricard to lose trust in JD, and with a bunch of backwards maneuvering, he decides to hand his extra vote over to Shan. We also get a really powerful and personal moment from Shan as she compares Survivor to her personal life.
I remember my mom making me choose if I wanted to live with my dad or my mom.
Number 2, the repulse puzzle. If you blink, you will miss it, and because the previous episodes had it during the challenge, I had to rewind it because I thought I wasn't paying close enough attention and missed it. But no, the producers decided to change it up this episode and have the puzzle appear at Tribal Council. Here's a better shot at what the puzzle looks like, and the answer was, don't rock the boat. And of course, the number 1 moment from the episode is the Ua Tribal Council. Brad has a steal vote that he can't use, JD gave his extra vote to Shan, and Jeannie gets exposed for voting for Ricard and spelling his name wrong during the first visit to Tribal Council. With some weird analogies about crystals being a form of trust, Jeff explains to the viewers that this vote is going to come down to strength versus loyalty. And if you remember, during last week's episode, we saw Vochi give a personal story before being voted out, and so when we saw JD explain his story about growing up loving Survivor and watching his idols like Ozzy, Malcolm, and Wu, then I thought, oh no, 100% his torch is gonna get snuffed. Good job, Jeff, you blindsided me with this episode as it gets revealed that Brad was voted out and gets sent right back to the ranch.